Young astronomers, why are you here? Why were you born? Why do you even exist? Was it simply to spend your lives endlessly shuffling paper? No, it must be for a greater purpose. The mere fact that we're here at all is just too incredible. I don't know about you, but I'm here to review the movie Pontiac Moon. I was 10 years old the summer the movie is set to take place. And so I'm going to tell you what parts of that movie are accurate and what parts seem fake to me.
According to Darwin, why am I here in this classroom talking to you? But more importantly, why are you here? Why were you born? Why do you exist? Is it to spend your lives endlessly shuffling papers? No, it must be for a greater purpose. The mere fact that we're here is simply too incredible.
Does he remind you of anyone we know? Anyhow, we soon discovered that the science teacher has a son, and he owns a 1949 Pontiac Chief.
The trusty old Chief. Every man should own a car like this once in his life.
We didn't own a Pontiac when I was a kid. In the 1960s, we were one of the first families in Palo Alto to own a Mercedes-Benz. It was a red 1958 180D. At that time, when people thought Mercedes, they thought of staff cars for high-ranking Nazis. My dad was a World War II combat vet, but for whatever reason, he identified with the counterculture movement. And so he traded in the Benz for a 23-window VW van. On which we painted flowers to give it a hippie vibe. The irony is that if we had kept that 23-window van, it'd be worth about $150,000 today. In the movie, we discover that it's set in July 1969, which, as I said, was the summer I was 10 years old, the same age as the boy in the film. And just like him, I was eagerly anticipating the first lunar landing. Back then, models were huge, and just like Andy, I built replicas of the Apollo spacecraft. But let's talk about his friend Fred for a moment. Some kids were more interested in Star Trek than NASA. But as for him saying that the moon landing was faked, no, that doesn't ring true with me. I never heard anyone say that until 2 years after the fact. If Fred wanted to poke a hole in Andy's balloon, he would have insisted that in spite of all the evidence to the contrary, Russia was ahead of us in space. Believe it or not, I heard that a lot.
To construct a ship and navigate it 238,857 miles to the moon.
Launching that thing from inside a classroom? No way. However, he might have from the playground.
Why does man commit himself to such a huge challenge? Go to all this trouble. Risk his very life for it, just to fly to the moon. Yes.
To discover new minerals that'll be useful to mankind?
That's what they tell you, to find. They do it because it's never been done, because it's fun, because it's dangerous, because it makes us feel alive. Challenges, risks, Without these, man ceases to evolve.
I agree
Your life.
with everything the science teacher said. However, I never had a teacher who was even remotely that jazzed up about spaceflight. They used to roll in a portable TV so we could watch the space missions live. But with the exception of my first grade teacher, Mrs. Miskell, my teachers were pretty indifferent, even when we watched the re-entry of Apollo 13 and had no idea if the men would live or die. But now the plot thickens.
This car has accumulated 237,081 miles without a single overhaul. Andy, what's the distance to the moon?
238,857 miles.
Correct. Now, in another 1,776 miles, to the moon exactly. This is our chance, Andy.
The distance from the Earth to the moon is on average 238,856 miles. But since the moon's orbit is elliptical as opposed to circular, this distance varies. The moon might be as close to the Earth as 225,700 miles, that's called the perigee, or as far away as 251,900 miles, called the apogee. This called a supermoon, and a small moon is called a micromoon. The chief has already driven the distance to the moon. It's only a matter of how close the moon is at any given moment.
in order to match the mileage to the moon, we must follow this route exactly.
Through the Nevada desert, into Arizona, along the old Santa Fe Trail.
Then there we hit our destination. Spires of the moon.
As for spires of the moon, it doesn't exist in Idaho or anywhere else for that matter. There is, however, a Craters of the Moon National Monument and Preserve in Idaho. Apollo astronauts trained at Craters of the Moon lava field, so perhaps this was simply an error on the part of the writer.
Does Neil Armstrong have to live with his parents? Cannot predict now.
The toy that Andy is playing with is called a magic 8-ball. Did I have one when I was his age? Well, look what I found in my attic.
That's okay. I'm not going to school tomorrow. What? Why? My father and I are going to drive the distance to the moon. We're going to a place called Spires of the Moon. Where's that? Idaho. My father says some things only happen once in a lifetime. So when they do, you've got to be willing to act.
We're waiting here.
Fred's mom is a reporter, and during Apollo 11, many reporters were interested in finding some sort of human interest angle. It's completely believable that she'd want to write about this.